I'm Sal Greco, and you're watching and listening to The Sal Greco Show. Thanks for watching. If you can, if you're listening or you're watching, so if you're on YouTube, please click that like button, hit that share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button on Rumble. You can hit the follow button, hit the Rumble button, and if you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, please give it a like and also subscribe. So with that being said, it's another couple of days of madness in the headlines, okay? And I'm going to get to at the end of the show, I'm going to discuss the entire Eric Adams situation with President Trump. I don't know what's going on there. And the Daily News is picking up on things that they're hearing that he's asking and begging for a pardon. It's constant drumbeat. So we're going to get to that later. But first, I wanted to start with this article that was written about an incident that happened at Rikers. And this was a law that was put into place very recently. It was passed by City Council. And also, Mayor Eric Adams signed off on it also that we shouldn't have solitary confinement in the jail cells. And this is what happens after they passed it. This is what could go wrong, and it did go wrong. So let me show you this and read this off to you. Female Rikers officer punched in the face by hulking inmate wants NYC to reinstate solitary confinement. This is by Tina Moore of the New York Post. A longtime Rikers Island correction officer needed 6 stitches to close a gaping gash over her eye Friday after allegedly being bashed in the face by a violent inmate at the notorious city jail. The 47-year-old, who asked to remain anonymous because she wasn't cleared to speak publicly, told the Post she's tired of the island's incarcerated getting off scot-free and is calling on the city to revive the recently sacked solitary confinement. Quote, "They just assault us and come right back into the same housing areas," end quote, said the officer who has spent a decade on the job. Quote, "They brag about this," she added. "They say I just assaulted an officer, but nothing's going to happen to me. They used to get put in segregation," end quote. The officer was at work Friday afternoon when she saw inmate Rosita Sanders, who stands a hulking 5 feet 10 inches and weighs an oversized 200 pounds, allegedly strike another inmate. The officer, who's a much slighter 5'4", was reporting the assault when Sanders snuck up behind her and clocked her on the side of the face, she added. Quote, "I was in shock from the first blow," end quote. The officer, who has a 12-year-old son, said. The officer said she asked the inmate, quote, "Why did you hit me?" end quote. Sanders, whose rap sheet includes 2 alleged assaults from earlier this month, simply responded, quote, "Just spray me," end quote. The officer said, referring to pepper spray the guards carry. There was blood gushing down the officer's face as she grabbed a piece of white paper and pressed it against the wound. Quote, "I had blood everywhere," end quote, she recalled. Quote, "I put a piece of paper on the side of my face and just walked to the clinic," end quote. Sanders is in Rikers awaiting trial on the alleged attacks from early November, court records show. She was rearrested for pouncing on the unsuspecting officer and hit with second-degree assault and other charges, according to the Correction Officers Union. But, quote, "It doesn't matter," said the officer. "She's already in jail for assault," end quote. A few days before the violent encounter, the serial assaulter had also attacked another inmate and was right back in general population, the officer told the Post. The officer said she wants the city to bring back solitary confinement or come up with another punishment for inmates who aggressively abuse correction officers. There have been more than 450 assaults on correction officers since the city council banned solitary confinement in December 2023, according to the union. Quote, "This jail ran a little bit better when we used to have segregation," end quote, she said. Quote, "They have to come up with some type of system where they are held accountable for their actions. You can't just go around hitting people and not get punished for it," end quote. Benny Boschio, president of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association, pointed the finger at the lefty-led city council for igniting the issue. Quote, this unprovoked assault on our officer who was simply doing her job is yet another stark reminder of how the city council's reckless legislation, which protects violent offenders while jeopardizing the safety of our officers, has failed everyone in our jails, end quote, said Boschio. Just last month, an alleged pervert locked up at Rikers groped city councilwoman Sandy Nurse during a tour of the troubled jail. Quote, the council members who voted to ban putative segregation should take a closer look at the results of the past election and realize that more and more New Yorkers are rejecting their soft on crime policies, end quote, said Boschio. The officer, meanwhile, remains at home taking care of herself and her son. Quote, my son was like, Mom, what happened? Are you all right? She recalled, he's a little traumatized, end quote. So there you can tell that, listen, this solitary confinement law that was passed, I understand the reasoning or the trying to get a reason behind it. But in all reality, the reason there is solitary confinement is it's kind of a form of punishment or to try to keep certain people that are in the justice system away from each other, from either harming each other or harming others. So here's something that probably should have never been taken off the books as far as legislatively goes, and it needs to be revisited once again because we can't have our correction officers and our officers that are manning these cells where these, criminals are at be put in harm's way. They don't have the access to their firearms. You can't have a firearm walking around. You can't walk around in the cells with them. So what is their only defense? The fact that you can, if need be, if there's justification for it, put someone in solitary confinement. And this incident should have never happened, and it squarely should be put on the shoulders of one New York City Council that's very progressive in nature. And, as much as I say, like Lincoln Ressler, Councilman Lincoln Ressler is the Trey Gowdy of City Council. A lot of bluster, but there's no bite. There's no action. It's just a lot of bluster. So, listen, someone needs to come up with a better solution. We had a city councilwoman that was actually groped by a prisoner. I guess no solitary confinement for that either. This legislation was crazy. It was a way to pander for, progressive points amongst progressives, and it just doesn't work yet again. So this needs to be revisited and changed. I feel very sorry for this officer. I hope that she recovers from her injuries and returns back to work ASAP. Please, this needs to be revisited. This law needs to be changed, at least to make it reasonable. It's unreasonable right now. So the next topic I want to touch up on is, here's a good one. So, we all think here on this show, and I mentioned it plenty of times, that New York City Mayor Eric Adams is the worst mayor in America. Well, the Chicago mayor, he's giving him a run for his money. He actually might be even worse. And here is an article that I'll read and show you that will kind of back that up. Trump supporter slams Chicago mayor to his face moments before city council rejected tax hike. The feds need to address you. This is by Gabriel Hayes from Fox News. Ahead of a Chicago City Council vote unanimously rejecting Mayor Brandon Johnson's proposed $300 million property tax hike, local residents addressed the council and the mayor, criticizing Johnson to his face over trying to raise taxes while catering to illegal immigrants. Among these angry locals were several supporters of President-elect Donald Trump, who, while wearing MAGA gear, gloated about how Trump's victory means Johnson's liberal policies, particularly those assisting illegal immigrants, will face a reckoning. Quote, the feds need to address you. The DOJ needs to address you. And hopefully Donald Trump will address you, because you're going to protect the undocumented while you're going to allow for the citizens in Chicago to suffer under your, what, 3%? End quote. Chicago resident Taiwan Sims told the mayor on Thursday night. Chicago residents have been angry with Johnson and other city officials for some time now, especially over policies allocating taxpayer money to benefit illegal immigrants that have flooded the city in recent years. Locals blistered the Chicago City Council in a meeting in February about city and state officials had approved hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to feed, clothe, and house more than 35,000 migrants who have been transported to Chicago and its suburbs in the prior year and a half. Quote, they're junking up our country, and yeah, we feel some kind of way about it because it's our country, end quote, one Chicago resident said at the time. Quote, we're going to get them out of our communities because they don't deserve to be here, end quote. The city council convened the special meeting this week to vote on Johnson's property tax hike proposal, with less than 2 months before the city has to pass a new city budget. In a historic repudiation, all 50 city council members voted against Johnson's $300 million tax hike that would have increased Chicago's homeowners' expenses by up to 4%. The Chicago Sun-Times noted, however, quote, the unanimous vote was largely symbolic. Negotiations to reduce or eliminate the property tax increase and replace it with a mix of new revenue and reprogram federal pandemic relief funds began last weekend, end quote. An Illinois outlet, their Center Square, reported Johnson, quote, said the property tax hike was necessary to avoid laying off city workers like police officers and firefighters as Chicago faces a nearly $1 billion budget gap, end quote. Prior to the vote, the council allowed locals to address the city government, including the mayor, who presided over the meeting. Several frustrated Chicagoans took out their anger on the mayor and shared their satisfaction that the city was becoming redder. Resident Dennis White stepped up to the mic wearing a black MAGA hat with red letters and asked the chamber, quote, how does it feel that Trump is in office right now? End quote. Quote, you see, Mayor Brandon Johnson, you underestimate us. You underestimate the black people and underestimate Chicago red. End quote. He continued, referencing Republicans in the city. Quote, you know that Trump had pulled 45% of the voter in the state of Illinois, 37% in Chicago. That's the statistic. That means that Illinois is turning purple. We gonna turn red, end quote, he warned. Quote, you're just like a schoolyard bully, end quote. Jessica Jackson told Johnson, wearing an all-red outfit she blistered to the mayor, adding, quote, but those of us who grew up on the south side and west side of Chicago, we all know at some point that bully gets cornered in an alley and everybody come at him, and he ain't going to have nobody to help him. That's you. So you and the rest of them that know what time it is, y'all come on. You leave that loss where he is. He's a loser. He's a loser, end quote. Another local who marked herself down as Miss Lawrence for her comments trashed the mayor while wearing a red Make America Godly Again shirt. She brought up Johnson's recent approval numbers from Change Research, showing him at a woeful 14% approval rating. Quote, 14% rating is what you appear to have, Brandon Johnson, across the United States on how they see you. 14% rating, end quote. She blasted him for the tax hike proposal. Quote, what about our real estate? Because, see, we paid for these properties for a purpose and not for you to go touching it with $300 million that you want to siphon out of the citizens' pockets. She then yelled into the mic, get rid of the illegals, and that will take your money right back. Started off with that, end quote. The mayor's office did not immediately reply to Fox News Digital's request for comment. Yeah, so what can I say? This mayor is, who's good friends with Eric Adams, I understand. He's in the same ilk, if not worse. He is a beyond progressive that has continued to run Chicago into the ground. You can see that the constituents there, the taxpayers there, the voters there, they're not going to go along with this for much longer, and they're letting their voices be heard. This is what I've always said. You must take your cities back by going local, by being vocal, local. See, local is the key. Yes, President-elect Donald Trump will become the next president, but your mayor and your city council is what's really affecting you worse than anyone on a federal government level. Because these see what this mayor did and the city council there by sticking all these illegal immigrants into the city has basically added to the public safety issues, and also it's a burden on the taxpayers. So now you have to go and make it be well known what your intentions are and what you expect from your politicians. And if not, there'll be a new election very soon where you could pick new city council members and a mayor in Chicago. And that goes for many other cities and districts in the United States. Never be afraid to go to city council, any of these hearings, and just let them be heard what your feelings are and what's really going on. I applaud these citizens. We need more of this. And that mayor, he's in a hell of a lot of trouble politically. I don't know what's the future as far as the Chicago mayor, and hopefully the residents of Chicago will be voting a little different in the upcoming elections there. So now we're going to segue into one of my favorite subjects, the New York City Police Department. And we have the top 20 or whatever they call top 100 earners for the fiscal year, or July to July. And, well, the list came out, and it seems that, again, this is a list of cronies, because usually cronyism and nepotism runs wild, and that's how you get ahead in the police department. Aide to top NYPD chief raked in $400K as administrators cash in on overtime bonanza. This was in the New York Daily News, and it's by Graham Raymond and Rocco Pariscondola. Meet the highest paid member of the NYPD, and it's not the police commissioner. Quatisha Epps, a lieutenant special assignment who works in chief of department Jeffrey Madry's office, made $406,515 in fiscal 2024, which ended June 30th. City payroll records show. Former police commissioner Edward Caban, who quit in September amid a federal investigation, by contrast, made $285,313 in fiscal 2024, or $118,203 less. As part of Epps' enormous sum she put in for working 1,626 hours of overtime on top of the 2,214 regular hours she was paid for, the records show. The overtime bonanza netted her $204,453 over her regular salary of $175,893. She earned another $26,169 in other pay. For context, if she labored for 52 weeks straight without vacation or days off, that volume of hours translates to working 73 hours a week, including 33 hours a week of overtime. All in, the top 20 overtime earners at the NYPD took in $6,770,828 in fiscal 2024. Payroll records show. Those numbers help fuel skyrocketing NYPD overtime costs, which topped $1 billion in fiscal 2024, the highest amount ever, the news previously reported. Top brass have blamed a shortage of cops, protests, and unplanned events for the escalation, coming as police presence in subways, parks, and other spots has been beefed up to allay concerns about safety. The Police Benevolent Association has said the grind of forced overtime is burning out cops who work the streets and leading them to retire in droves. A Daily News analysis of the department's top 400 overtime earners shows well over half are, in fact, in operational units, mostly in units like narcotics, emergency services, warrants, and gun suppression. 64 are assigned directly to police precincts and 45 to transit commands, including 16 in the transit K-9 unit. but a significant portion of the top 400 have administrative assignments. For example, 13 of the top 400 earners are assigned to the police commissioner's office, including Sergeant Dennis Rodriguez, who made $278,265 in fiscal 2024, including $113,000 from 983 hours of overtime. Quote, we cannot possibly expect the NYPD to get their overtime spending in check when its leaders at the highest levels appear to be abusing it, said City Comptroller Brad Lander. Paper-pushing brass cannot be clocking in overtime if they want to instill some level of trust and order among the public and their ranks, end quote. Even as overtime skyrockets, the line operational units are constantly short-staffed, fighting to keep up with an expanding caseload, said several police sources. Those factors have contributed to a wave of retirements in those units. Meanwhile, top brass are constantly harassing commands when individual cops in line units exceed their overtime cap, a precinct cop said. Quote, this is the greatest challenge the NYPD has faced in years, end quote, one police union source said. Madry in March told the council the department was keeping its ballooning overtime costs under control. Quote, I want you to be assured that we do put our best efforts into reduce overtime, Madry declared at the time. Our biggest challenge with reducing overtime is the unforeseen and unknown, end quote. 12 of the top 400 are assigned to Chief of Patrol John Schell's office, 4 to Madry's office, and 3 to First Deputy Commissioner Tanya Kinsella. There are top earners working in a range of non-enforcement units like data analysis and mapping, the emergency prep and exercise section, the property clerk's office, the orders and directives section, and the police pension fund. 2 of the top 400 are assigned to the NYPD Public Information Office, including Detective First Grade Esther Bueno, who earned $305,554 in fiscal 2024, including $122,116 on 975 hours of overtime. Epps, the lieutenant in Madry's office, is essentially an office supervisor. Quote, she has an inside job. An irate NYPD source said, it's a misuse of taxpayer money, end quote. Epps, who was profiled in 2019 by New York One as a 3-time cancer survivor, billed the city for 1,000 overtime hours in fiscal 2023, but just 496 hours in fiscal 2022 and 258 hours in fiscal 2021. In her 19-year career, which began in 2005, Epps has made just 16 felony arrests along with 61 misdemeanor busts and issued 19 non-criminal violations, NYPD records show. The NYPD did not reply to inquiries from the news. Lou Turco, president of the Lieutenants Benevolent Association, said only, quote, these are fiscal year numbers. The members of the police department work with calendar year numbers, end quote, including Epps. 4 of the top 20 overtime earners worked in headquarters jobs in fiscal 2024. Detective Second Grade Ingrid Sanders, who also works in Madry's office, earned $352,462, including $163,413 on 1,456 overtime hours. Lieutenant Special Assignment John Brennan, an aide to Chief of Patrol John Schell, made $378,438, including $168,132 in overtime for 1,254 claimed hours. Lieutenant Special Assignment Christopher LaMarche, an aide to Caban, made $347,405, including $144,248 on 1,048 hours of overtime. Police sources said Sanders, Brennan, and LaMarche were constantly with Madry, Schell, and then Police Commissioner Caban as those officials attended meetings and events after hours. Quote, the staggering amounts of overtime generated by these NYPD executive officers is questionable and shows increasing mismanagement of existing resources to adequately support the department's rank and file workforce and New Yorkers, end quote, said Randy DeSamores, a city council spokesman. Quote, other city agencies do not come close to this, illustrating the double standard that allowed for the department's management challenges, end quote. Overall, 382 cops made $100,000 or more in overtime, and 264 cops billed 1,000 hours of overtime or more in fiscal 2024. The payroll records show. EPS may have been paid the most overtime dollar amount, but 3 department employees actually claim to have logged more hours. Luana High, a communications tech, billed for 2,091 hours. Another tech, Suzette Bailey Cora, billed for 1,969 hours. Traffic agent Pedro Dominguez billed for 1,759 hours. So listen, this Lieutenant Epps, I don't know. I guess, I don't know why she's being rewarded with this administrative overtime. If you're working in your office, I mean, I think the hours don't even equate to you being in your office. Like, I think that there might be some overtime that was incurred while they weren't even technically on the clock, meaning they weren't in their office. They might have been home. I mean, this doesn't add up, but does anything add up in the New York City Police Department as far as anybody leading the way for this department? And one other gentleman that was on this list, Sergeant Dennis Rodriguez, someone who should be fired right now. You know why he should be fired? Because by their own definition of what criminal association is in the New York City Police Department, Dennis Rodriguez is very chummy and good friends with well-known self-admitted criminal mob associate and the former manager of the shuttered Conza Frito in the Bronx, Jimmy Rodriguez. And if you're associating and friends with him, which Dennis Rodriguez was seen in numerous pictures, videos, held events over there that, I don't know, should be under scrutiny how that even occurred from the New York City Police Department and certain associations. And if you're associating with Jimmy, you should be fired, right? Because he's a quote-unquote known to, engage in criminal activity or has in the past or in the future with those human trafficking allegations that were reported to the New York City Police Department from Conza Frito, and yet we don't know whatever happened to that. It just vanished. And Dennis Rodriguez should be fired, but hey, he instead gets rewarded, and he's still in the police commissioner's office, even though his pal, Eddie Caban, who had his house raided and his phones taken and all his brothers are being looked at because they're all doing something they shouldn't be doing, apparently. Well, Dennis Rodriguez gets rewarded by bringing in, $270,000 total for a fiscal year. This stinks. It's cronyism and nepotism. That's what the list is really full of. And it is true. If you are a regular cop that works hard and just does arrests or does overtime in a precinct and you're a hard worker, the commanding officer will scrutinize why that officer is making overtime and not certain officers that work in administrative roles and do nothing. And there's so many scheming and scamming units in the police department, I've lost count. But those people will profit and do whatever they want and face no scrutiny because they're the closest to the king. The king being who? The mayor, Eric Adams, who seems to be so involved in the New York City Police Department business on a day-to-day basis that you don't think that maybe he's a de facto police commissioner himself. So with that being said, we're going to segue to the final segment of this show, and that's going to be what we've been hearing over and over again about the whole Damian Williams having to step down because President-elect Donald Trump has nominated a new SDNY head. So let me show you and read off this great article written by the Daily News. With Manhattan U.S. Attorney Damian Williams leaving, questions swirl about Mayor Eric Adams' case. This is in the New York Daily News. It's from Molly Crane Newman and the Batman of the New York City Press Corps, Chris Sommerfeld. Since he took the helm of the Southern District of New York Federal Prosecutor's Office in 2021, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams has been on the warpath against public corruption. Most recently, Williams secured an indictment in September against Eric Adams, accusing the New York City mayor of bribery, fraud, and campaign finance crimes stemming from a plot to sell political influence to wealthy Turkish government officials starting when he was Brooklyn Borough president. The bombshell case against Adams came on the heels of Williams winning a corruption conviction against another powerful Democrat, New Jersey's ex-U.S. Senator Bob Menendez. In addition to prosecuting sitting polls, this year he has brought corruption charges against high-ranking FDNY chiefs for taking cash to fast-track safety inspections in a historic bribery case against NYCHA employees for cheating residents out of better services. Questions have arisen about the future of the office's aggressive pursuit of prosecuting corruption in government and the case against Adams in particular following Donald Trump's election victory. The president-elect announced Thursday that he plans to install in Williams' place his former chief of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Jay Clayton, whom the U.S. Senate must confirm. The incoming president has made no secret about his thoughts on the case against Adams. Quote, "We were persecuted, Eric," end quote, he recently said at a charity dinner attended by the mayor. A new DOJ. The Republican president-elect stunned many this week, announcing he will seek to install contentious Florida Republican Matt Gaetz as Attorney General and his lead lawyers from the hush money trial, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, as numbers 2 and 3 at the Department of Justice. Trump said Bove would serve as his acting deputy attorney general while Blanche undergoes the Senate confirmation process. Trump, who faced 2 criminal indictments filed after his chaotic first term, has vowed revenge against his perceived enemies and to knock down the proverbial walls erected after President Richard Nixon's Watergate scandal that established the DOJ's independence from the White House. Quote, "I will direct a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical, out-of-control prosecutor in America for their illegal, racist, and reverse enforcement of the law," end quote, Trump said on the campaign trail in February. If Trump plans to direct prosecutions from the Resolute desk, there is little standing in his way this time. The July Supreme Court ruling granting the president sweeping protections from criminal prosecutions gave him carte blanche to do so. The decision declared him, quote, absolutely immune, end quote, from facing charges related to his discussions with the DOJ and outlined his, quote, exclusive authority over the investigative and prosecutorial functions, quote, of the department. Besides railing against his own indictments as extensions of a political witch hunt, Trump has claimed without any evidence that Williams, who did not wish to comment for this story, targeted the mayor unfairly for his criticism of the Biden administration's handling of the migrant crisis. Quote, "I know what it's like to be persecuted by the DOJ for speaking out against open borders," end quote. Trump emphasized from the dais at the nationally televised Al Smith charity dinner on October 17th as Adams sat a few tables away. Will Trump help Adams? If Trump succeeds at pushing Clayton through the confirmation process, it's unclear whether he would acquiesce if asked to end the case against the mayor, or whether Trump would even bother to get involved in a case against a Democrat in a deep blue city. Whoever the new appointee is at the SDNY, the U.S. Attorney's Office would need to offer an explanation to and seek approval from Manhattan Federal Judge Dale Ho before getting a dismissal. Arlo Devin Brown, chief of the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Public Corruption Unit from 2014 to 2016 and an attorney at the Covington law firm, said a Trump nominee might not even be confirmed before Adams' trial in April. Devlin Brown said he expected the new U.S. attorney to review Adams' case as they will all significant cases. Quote, "If Clayton is the U.S. attorney, he has an excellent reputation and in my judgment would be unlikely to squander that in order to do political bidding that he sees as contrary to the interest of justice. I would also expect line prosecutors to leave the office before they would do something that they felt was not being done in the spirit of the fair administration of justice," end quote, Devlin Brown told the Daily News. Quote, "If the president was inclined to have the charges against Mayor Adams dismissed, the cleanest way for him to do so would be to pardon the mayor even before any trial starts," end quote. But if Trump sent word that he wanted the case to go away, Clayton could make that happen. he could also offer Adams a chance to plead out to a reduced charge. Adams has pled not guilty. Quote, there is a process that they would have to go through in dismissing a case after an indictment, but a judge is likely going to rubber stamp any request to drop a prosecution. End quote. Former federal prosecutor Duncan Levin said, quote, it's basically whatever the U.S. attorney wants to do, end quote. For months, the Democratic mayor has fueled criticism from members of his own party for refraining from criticizing Trump, with some speculating he's doing so in hopes the incoming president will help him with his legal troubles. Asked Friday whether he had a reaction to Clayton's appointment, Adams told reporters, quote, no, I don't, end quote. City Hall under fire. Besides Adams' indictment, Trump's appointee could affect several ongoing corruption investigations that have ensnared key advisors to the mayor. Since those probes have not produced any criminal charges to date, Clayton or another Trump appointee could wind them down without sign-off from a judge. Trump hasn't said anything publicly about those probes, and it's unclear whether he'd seek to disrupt them once back in the White House. The inquiries, which are unrelated to the Turkey probe that prompted Mayor Eric Adams' indictment, burst into public view on September 4th when more than half a dozen top aides to the mayor, including former NYPD Commissioner Ed Caban, former First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, former Schools Chancellor David Banks, former Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Phil Banks, and Senior City Hall Advisor Tim Pearson had their homes raided and electronics seized by FBI agents. All of those officials have resigned. The investigations are scrutinizing whether top Adams officials engaged in influence peddling and kickbacks on city contracts, including ones awarded to clients of Terrence Banks, a government relations consultant who's the younger brother of Phil and David Banks, according to sources. Other Adams associates have similarly been entangled in separate corruption investigations led by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney's Office, including the mayor's chief advisor, Ingrid Lewis-Martin, and Winnie Greco, his former Asian Affairs liaison at City Hall. SDNY investigators also served Lewis-Martin with a subpoena a day after Adams was indicted. Clayton's track record. Clayton, an attorney and advisor at high-powered corporate law firm Sullivan & Cromwell, was Trump's chairman of the SEC from 2017 to 2020. The potential incoming, quote, sheriff of Wall Street, end quote, has never worked as a criminal prosecutor in his career and sits on the board of American Express and Apollo Global Management, one of the world's largest asset management firms. Clayton could not be reached for comment. Under Clayton's leadership, the SEC in 2018 brought security fraud charges against Elon Musk for misleading tweets he made before he bought Twitter and changed it to X. That caused Tesla's stock price to jump and mess with the market. The resulting settlement, which did not require Musk to admit wrongdoing, forced him to step down as the chairman of Tesla for 3 years and required him and Tesla to pay a $20 million fine and other forms of relief. Musk wasn't then an ally of Trump, so it's unclear whether the SEC enforcement action signals that Clayton would be comfortable pursuing Trump's allies as targets. Trump tried to install Clayton at the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office without success in 2020, which led to a dramatic showdown with his former Attorney General Bill Barr, sought to oust then U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman, who objected to the nomination based on Clayton's lack of prosecutorial experience. Berman left when it was clear his deputy, Audrey Strauss, would take over. In his memoir, Berman said he felt Trump and Barr forced him out to install someone who would do the White House's bidding. Quote, I knew Jay Clayton and liked him. He lived in Tribeca near me, and I had run into him a couple times when we were each out for drinks with people from our offices. He is an extremely talented lawyer, but had never been a prosecutor, which is, or should be, a prerequisite for leading SDNY, end quote, Berman wrote. Levin said he believes Clayton's primary purpose as U.S. attorney would be to do Trump's bidding, an assessment he attributed to the attorney's lack of prosecutorial experience. Quote, this is a cynical pick that shows Trump cares mostly about putting in loyalists who will do what he wants, end quote, he said. Manhattan Councilwoman Gail Brewer, a Democrat who chairs the council's Oversight and Investigation Committee, debated Clayton at the Harvard Club on October 21st as part of a 2024 election forum where she advocated for Vice President Kamala Harris while he pushed for Trump. They also had a 2-hour dinner together afterwards. Quote, from my limited experience debating him, the guy is really smart. He seems like the guy who's a quick study. End quote, Brewer said. At the same time, Brewer shared concerns about Clayton not having relevant experience to head the premier prosecutor's office. Quote, in terms of a lack of skill set, it's concerning, she said. He's definitely a loyalist, Brewer continued. And if he's the type of person who could probably pick it up, he might pick up ways of prosecuting cases in ways I wouldn't. End quote. All right, so the Daily News does a very good job at highlighting, I guess, how a transition would occur and what happens somewhat in the office of the Southern District of New York, and how, passing the baton would be from one former boss to another. But it's just highlighting probably the level of hypocrisy here. First by New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and then in the event of something, illogically happen where Eric Adams gets pardoned, it would be a grave injustice. That I will tell you. And there's probably thousands, if not millions of people in this country and also around the world that would agree with that, because the appearance of impropriety here, along with the criminality of Eric Adams' own actions and behavior, are egregious, and they should never be pardoned, let alone we haven't even heard the case. We don't know. There should be superseding indictments. I keep hearing this over and over again. So, there's other factors in this case. How can you just turn around and try to pardon someone or go easy on them, as what's being suggested here? And listen, let's be very frank. We don't know where these rumors are coming from. We've never heard President Trump outright say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. You didn't hear the incoming person that's nominated to become the SDNY head, say anything about this. I think people are just in a frenzy, and I think a lot of it comes from Eric Adams' own camp and whatever delusions of grandeur Eric Adams or the people around him have, because he is not only a highly convicted individual, but he surrounds himself with corruptible people. And in this instance, many of those corruptible people are already either A, under investigation, B, are in some kind of incoming sealed indictment, and C, we don't know if they're going to be named in something on their own, meaning I don't know, they could have other investigations. There could be state or city investigations involving the Department of Investigations. That would be something that Alvin Bragg, unfortunately, the Manhattan DA, he would bring forward. So that could happen also. So there's so many variables here. Everybody's just, jumping in front of the line, assuming things, and that's usually how problems occur. But there is one thing I was going to get to, and apparently when President-elect Donald Trump hit the MSG for the UFC that occurred, the event of UFC, they had a big fight night there, and I guess Mayor Eric Adams decided to be the charlatan that he is. He tried to walk over to say hello, because we all know what he's begging for these days. So all right, so as you can tell, the indicted New York City mayor decided to walk up to President-elect Trump and try to either greet him or beg for his pardon or whatever it is that he's doing, because believe me, he was just a few months ago asking to have him be put in a cell at Rikers Island in case Judge Merchant would have not only said he finds Trump guilty of those bogus charges that they did find him guilty on, which, that whole case, that's a whole nother story. But that if he decided to remand him that day, Eric wanted him to be in a special cell in Rikers Island. He then also was currying all kinds of stuff up there at Conso Frito in the Bronx, where every anti-Trump politician was known to go there, including the Attorney General of New York State, which is Letitia James. And, of course, there were allegations of human trafficking that went to the New York City Police Department, and it all of a sudden vanished. And the owner was the brother of the police commissioner, Ed Caban, his brother, Richard Caban. And now there's all kinds of investigations going on around there, including the police department officials that were there. So now we have Eric Adams with all of that baggage walking over, begging for a pardon. Let's we not forget, Eric is involved in 2 sexual misconduct cases, one in which he's the defendant of a sexual assault case, and in another where he's also a defendant in the sexual misconduct case of Dana Ratchlin, along with Chief of Patrol John Schell, the Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry, and the Deputy Commissioner of Operations Kaz Daughtry. And who pays for all of that? Not a lawyer that somebody would hire. It's the New York City taxpayer via corporation counsel that's paying for that. So if that's who you're going to attach yourself to, remember what comes with it. I don't know what exactly the strategy, if there is one for President Trump. I just think the mayor just happened to want to be over there puckering up to him because of his issues. Trump, the president-elect, is just being nice, shaking his hand, wishing him good luck with everything. And it's nothing more than that. As you could tell, everyone else in that entourage of President Trump's didn't even move and want nothing to do with Eric Adams. And I think that says it all. So before everybody just puts the cart in front of the horse, remember there's going to be a trial in April. And also, we still don't know what's going to happen with everything else involving the investigations and the other pending superseding indictments and everything else that surrounds the world of Eric Adams, where New York City is a mess and he's in charge. And yet that should be the real issue. Why can't we fix New York City? Why can't we come together and fix New York City? That's the main goal. So with that being said, you could go on Rumble, hit the like button, hit the follow button on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, hit those buttons, hit the notification button. If you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, give it a like and a follow. And we will be back with more incoming news when it comes to the world of politics, when it comes to the world of New York City. And if there's anything else that occurs in the world of Eric Adams, because that should be the focus of New York City taxpayers, because right now, people just want to see change for the better. They want to know when they walk outside, they don't have to see some guy defecating on their doorstep. They don't want to go in the subways and see people shooting up drugs, running around naked, slamming their hands on the doors, assaulting people on the train. Women don't want to walk down the street and have to worry about being sucker punched in the face. That's what should be the biggest concern of the mayor and city council, but we'll see. With that being said, I'd like to say, see you on the next one. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.